Good morning, everybody. Thanks for holding on there. We're just running a couple minutes late this morning, getting the demo all set up. So we are excited to bring that to you today. So we have Helen and James here today, and the three of us are going to talk to you guys, well, mostly they're going to talk to you guys about iApps and what that means for Exchange, and a little bit about Lync, too. So we actually get to do a demo today. I'm super excited. That's awesome.
Thanks for having us.
So why don't you go ahead and do a little bit of an intro, tell everybody what they can expect, and a little bit about the technologies and why iApps is such a big thing.
Great, yeah, thank you. So for those of you who haven't heard yet, TMOS version 11 released this August from F5, and one of the big steps forward that we've taken with this release is the introduction of the iApp. And so for those of you who were online with us last time, we actually mentioned to you that iApps are this new object in the TMOS object model. For developers out there, you can think about the application object as a new part of the object model with its own specific attributes that can be used to configure a big IP for a specific application. Now, how is that different than templates? Templates in version 10 gave us the ability to present one UI to you where all of the key questions were answered in one place. But once you click go and applied that particular setting to the big IP, that group of settings was gone. And what the application object does for an iApp is give you the chance to create an instance of an application stored within the big IP. In other words, all of those settings are actually saved and aggregated together as an application instance so that you can change it and you can move it, you can save it as a one piece or one object within the config. And so that's why you can report statistics off of an application instance now within Big IP, and that's why it's so much easier and faster to deploy an application like Microsoft Exchange using an iApp. So as you'll see today, Helen's going to show you the iApp itself, and she's going to call out some of the higher level questions that we're asking you to fill out, which are much more user-friendly and much more application-like than they are a big IP network device or network object like. And so Helen will show you that demo, and then we'll take some questions. So thanks a lot for being with us here today, and I'll turn it over now to Helen to show you that demo.
Okay, great. Thanks, James. Thanks, April.
Yeah.
So what we have here is the big IP GUI, and let me just come up to the top of this thing. And so we are looking at an actual instance of version 11. It's running on my laptop. And what we have over here, it's kind of a wide screen, is we have it's called Application Services. This is where you would find the iApps. And I've gone ahead and built out Exchange 2010 just for ease of showing. But if you wanted to create your one for Exchange 2010 or for Lync, you would start with the little plus sign here. You would name it, and then you would pull down this list, and you have a list of all kinds of good stuff here, up to and including Exchange 2007.
Stop there on Lync. Yeah, stop on Exchange 2007, that's great.
Okay.
And then also on Lync.
And then Lync 2010, right there. So if I was to build this from scratch, I would name it My Lync Deployment. I would select Lync, and I would be presented with a bunch of questions. But for purposes of demos today, let me show you what I did for Exchange 2010. So I'll click on Exchange 2010 and I'll show you what I did. So what we have here is the properties, and we can go either basic properties or advanced properties. And what advanced does is it gives you the ability to enforce what we call strictness within the iApp. And what that means is the only way that you can change anything is to go up here to reconfigure, which I will show you in a moment. So let me show you the components that I built, and I can click there, and I have a whole bunch of pool members. I have monitors built. Let's see here, I have all kinds of good stuff here. And I'm not really hooked to anything, but oh well.
So we're getting some feedback that the screen is pretty pixelated as well.
Is it?
So I'm wondering whether if we make it smaller, that will actually help.
They'll make it
I don't
smaller.
know. I don't know.
What do you think, Joe? Smaller or bigger? Let's see here. I scroll over that way. that helping at all? Smaller, bigger? Doesn't matter?
I don't know, I'm asking.
So probably what will happen is that we'll run through the major points of the demo, and then we'll ask the people online there to play the replay of the file, where you can bring it up in full screen on your desktop and get a better view of what we're seeing. Okay. Yeah. So apologies for any inconvenience while we're showing the demo, but hopefully in the replay you'll be able to get a crisper picture of each of the UI elements.
It is very pretty, by the way, and I think that the replay will show that.
Yeah,
so
they're saying smaller is better, actually.
Smaller is better?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So we'll just shrink it down just a bit more, and then I'll scroll over just a bit more. Okay, so what we have here are all these elements that were built for me. Now, if I were to do this all myself, it would take me a while, and I used to work on this product in support many years ago, too. So, but because I used an iApp, it took me maybe 5 minutes to answer questions and fill in all the blanks.
So Helen, what you're saying is that each of the lines in that screen represents an object.
Yes.
In Big IP, and normally you would have to click through multiple UI screens or elements in Big IP just to configure one of those.
That is correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
So when we go back to the iApp at the end and we see the questions, then users will be able to correlate the low number of questions that we ask to the high number of objects that are automatically configured.
And that's where we're going to go right now. So let's hit reconfigure. So say I wanted to change a few things. We hit reconfigure, and you'll see all the questions that I got to answer. Okay, so now we start here with our basic versus advanced. And what this does is it just gives you the ability to denote what traffic group or what device group this goes with. And when I say device group, we're kind of we're scaling out from just the typical active standby thing. We can now have active standby, so 3 devices, for example, or 4 devices.
So this configuration can actually be used to deploy an application with Big IP, but more than one Big IP. Okay.
Yeah.
And can it also go across our virtual edition and the Viprion chassis?
That's a really good question. I think it can.
Yeah,
I think it can. So, but for our purposes today, we'll hit basic. And we have a little bit of verbiage up here that tells you what we're supporting here. And we're also advising you to always check this website right here.
Oh, look, it's DevCentral.
to make sure that you've got the latest and greatest. And in fact, we do upgrade these or update these fairly often. We just updated this one this week, as a matter of fact. So let's scroll down. We can do analytics, which then, if we answered yes here, we would get a whole nother profile questions or 2. But for our purposes today, we're just going to keep that closed. Now we have a deployment scenario, and we have our choice of 3 here. So the most common one that we see is whether local traffic manager is just going to load balance and optimize the CAS traffic. We see this one a lot. Now we give you some nice explanations as to what it is and when you should or should not use it. Conversely, we also have something forwarded from the Edge Gateway to this local traffic manager. We also have Edge Gateway and or APM will provide secure remote access to the CAS array. And whenever you pop those last 2 options up, you'll see down here that we get a bit more, a few more questions where APM are concerned. For our purposes today, we will just keep it a little simpler. Now, if we still want to, we change our minds and say, oh, well, let's add APM anyway, we can certainly do that. And one of the biggest reasons we're not today is because I don't have a domain controller running on my laptop. I think that might be asking a bit much of it. So we'll say no. So our next questions are tell us about deployment, the deployment, and so will the traffic arrive encrypted or decrypted? So we say encrypted. Now, a little caveat here, before any of this iApp stuff, deployment thing starts to go, before you start to do this, it's a really good idea to upload your certificate and your key pair so that you have them right here when you say, oh yeah, the traffic's encrypted, we're going to decrypt it, and here's what we're going to use to decrypt it with.
So if you're doing SSL offload to the big IP, upload the certs first, then configure the iApp.
Then configure the iApp. Thank you. I've only had 1 cup of coffee today, so I'm a little fuzzy-headed. And I flew in from Las Vegas, and boy, are my arms tired. Sorry. It had to be said. It had to be said. I'm sorry. So we give you the choice of either having the traffic re-encrypted or not. And we see this about half and half. You know, some of our customers say, oh, I've got to have it encrypted end to end. So what you can do here is we can re-encrypt it, and then you can use maybe a weaker cipher string pair so that you don't have to have your servers dealing with the 2K keys that are out there right now. But most people, well, maybe half the people, just leave it at unencrypted, send it in the clear to the CAS array. And then we can either do WAN or LAN optimizations, depending on what we select here.
So those are the TCP optimizations, right?
Yes,
okay.
They are. And then we give you the choice to say, okay, are these on the same subnet, different subnets, what are we doing here? So what I built today was everything's on the same subnet. It's a fairly flat network. We're using one VLAN, which means that everything goes in and out of the same VLAN, which also means then you need a SNAT. Now, we also say if you have fewer than 6,000 users, or 6,000 connections rather, we can just get away with a SNAT auto map. Now, keeping in mind that Exchange 2010 opens somewhere between 12 and 20 connections per user, this comes into play. And if you have one of these, this is my BlackBerry with the uber super case that I could probably drop off the side of a building. I get made fun of this all the time. So, if you have a BlackBerry, that's going to really chew up all of your ephemeral ports. So that's why having a SNAT auto map versus SNAT pool is very important. So less than 6,000, we stay with a SNAT auto map because you're not going to burn through those ports. But if we say more than 6,000, then we give you the ability to build yourself a SNAT pool. And we can add whatever IP in here is going to work for you. And we can add many IPs, as many or as few as you want. But again, for my purposes today, we'll just say less, because we're going to keep it simple. And then if we're going to use a single IP for the CAS array, or if we're going to use different IPs for different CAS services, single versus multiple. Again, you're going to see that things are going to change down below here as I switch between, between choices. And we've got all services handled by the same segment or the same pool of client access servers, or we can separate it out by service. And again, that's going to change, what you put in where. So let's scroll down and see what we actually ended up putting in. So because, as an administrator, I'm kind of lazy, if you've ever cut your teeth on Unix, you don't want to type out the whole word of, etc or user. We shorten it a bit. So we're going to stay with defaults here. Same thing applies. So we're going to stay with default pool settings, or we can go and do some customized pool settings. And then here's the virtual IP that we're using. It's 192.168.88.100. And I've deployed a few services here. So I have OWA, I have ECP, EWS. And for OWA, this is built into the template because you have to have this appended onto the end of any OWA request if you want it to actually work for your users. If it's something else, then you can just plug that in there. And we are deploying Outlook Anywhere. We are deploying ActiveSync and AutoDiscover and RPC. Now we've also decided to do some dynamic port mapping here, some dynamic ports here. If I were to say static ports, I would get a couple of fields where I could actually put in my static ports.
And that's actually recommended when you're using a load balancer with Exchange, right?
This is correct, it is.
Okay, so for RPC client traffic, the recommendation in our deployment guidance is static ports.
Right, and we do have them listed. Okay. You were saying, April?
Yeah, Jason asked a question. He's asking 6,000 connections per environment or per load balance server?
Ooh, that's a good question. I wonder what Microsoft would have to say about that. They would probably I don't really want to speak for Microsoft either. For load balanced environment or per server, I would say, personally I would say per server, but we'll want to look that up and make sure.
Well, that's what somebody else said too.
Yeah.
Somebody that said, that's viewing.
Yeah.
So one of his peers, yeah.
Cool. Yay.
Yeah.
Y'all are answering your own questions. Yes.
Yeah.
The problem is the number of users that have multiple clients, that have multiple connections against the same IP address, right?
Right.
And when those same number of users are using the same number of connections against that IP address, then that's when you get above the 65,000, right?
Right.
So the question is
Okay.
that IP address the virtual server on the big IP that we're talking about,
Right.
or is it a node in the CAS array? And I think it's that big IP, virtual server IP address, right? And so that's where you have groups of users all coming into the big IP trying to access the Exchange server.
Okay, so that's
Right.
where the limitation
Right.
is. Okay. Okay.
All right. So continuing on, that was a good question, by the way. Keep me on my toes. So Microsoft does recommend that you use static port mappings here, but like I said, I'm lazy, so we're just going to do dynamic. And I left POP3 and IMAP 4 out of the mix because, again, my laptop is pretty high powered, but I didn't want to ask quite that much of it. Now you can also put in pool members, and we can put in as many or as few as we want. Or if we decide that we just don't want one anymore, we can hit this little X here and it goes away. But you just hit add, you get another field. And I made a mistake, so I can just hit the X and it goes elsewhere. Now, server health monitors. When I was in support many years ago, I had people doing some very sophisticated monitoring with some very low intervals on it. Don't do that. So, because you will have false negatives, false positives, and you'll just drive yourself crazy. So we recommend every 30 seconds for an interval, and that's a really good, smooth, even-keeled interval to go with. And we say to use simple monitors here. You can also do advanced monitors, and again, look what I pop up here. All kinds of other information, like mailboxes,
Right.
which again, I don't have. But, if you've got that and you want to monitor that, that's what you'd be doing.
So Helen, I just want to call out one thing here. So
Yeah.
in version 10, when we first came out with the extended or the advanced monitors for Exchange, we actually had pages in our deployment guide that spelled out how to do that manually in the big IP.
Yep.
Now we're putting it all into just a few UI elements in the iApp, right? Now we still have the deployment guidance to explain what's going on, but the iApp does so much work behind the scenes, it really speeds up the deployment.
It really does.
Yeah.
It really does. Yeah, and so then you have your one fully qualified domain name for all HTTP services, or you can separate this out, different domains, and then you get, again, lots more fields, lots more typing. But since we're trying to keep things simple here, we just have the one domain, and it's mail.f5labs.com. And then if I had modified anything, I would have clicked finished. But instead, I'm going to go back up to the top here. And I'm going to show you again what I built yesterday by hitting components. And again, here's all my components that I would have built just by answering all those questions and plugging in the most, basic information asked of me. But here's some, I think there's some eye rolls. In fact, I know there's some eye rolls down here that I didn't have to write.
There, yeah, click on one of those. Redirect, is it a redirect eye rule? Is that what I see there? Just down below where you're sitting now, right there?
Right there?
Is that a all-in-one eye rule?
No,
That
I think that's
redirect?
just the one that in case you accidentally type HTTP instead of HTTPS.
Ah,
Yes.
that one's really popular, right? For a
Oh.
lot of people deploying Exchange and OA,
Yeah.
a lot of times what you need is a redirect for those users who don't type HTTPS.
Yeah, all those lazy
Right.
users out there who forget the S.
We have
Perfect.
another question when you get a minute too from Rodrigo. He's asking if we do re-encryption, what's the effect of the resource consumption for the big IP? Does it increase latency?
Not really, not really. And the reason that it doesn't increase latency, if it does, it's a really tiny amount, is that we have the specialized software and the specialized chipset in there. So, we're big fans of decryption here, but if you need to re-encrypt, we certainly will allow you to do that, and we won't bog anything down. So, where were we? We're looking at all kinds of rules here. Okay. You have to forgive me, I forgot my glasses, so I'm just kind of like squinting at the screen. But we have, our profiles, and then our persistence I rules, our OWA append I rule. So this would just say, okay, mail.f5labs.com/OWA if somebody was hitting the mail with the web browser. And we keep going down. We got all kinds of good stuff. RPC. We have our wildcard things. Wildcard monitor. And I'm sure this iRule's in here. I just can't see it.
There, it was right underneath the /OA.
Oh, it was. Okay.
So, third from the bottom.
Third from the bottom. Right there?
Yeah. That's the iRule for persistence and combining
Yes.
URLs.
Yeah. Next time I'll bring my glasses, I promise.
So that's the URL that I was mentioning before, where we allow you to do client type detection, so that we can tell an ActiveSync client from an RPC MAPI, from an Outlook Anywhere client, from an Outlook Web Access client, and redirect the traffic as needed into the Exchange server. So you expose one URL for Exchange on the internet instead of 3 or 4, and then therefore be more secure with your deployment, all combined into a simple configuration in the iApp. Now that's the big IP doing work for you on the network.
Right. So yeah, all of these things were built just by me answering some questions. It took me 5 minutes, 10 minutes, really not very long. And me clicking finish, and suddenly I have, I don't know, quite a few elements here. 50 or so.
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Helen, for showing everyone
thing.
the configuration and the properties in the iApp. And for any of you who've had an experience before with the template, you'll definitely see right away the value there when you have an object inside Big IP for an application instance, allowing you to go back and reconfigure a configuration for an app based on something that was entered previously without having to navigate through the classic network object model in the Big IP, hitting the virtual servers and the nodes and the profiles each individually. Rather, you can go into the Exchange instance and pick up the specific setting you need to change and change it. And then export that setting, if you want, that whole profile, we call it the iApp. Mm-hmm. So the iApp instance can be exported and then re-imported. And you can also take that iApp and deploy it across multiple devices within a sync group. And so again, iApps a great move forward for the Exchange business with F5. Anybody out there wanting to configure their application faster and with more flexibility and agility, and also be able to take statistics and show app statistics and network statistics for a specific app instance can use iApp to do that. So let's take any remaining questions that we have, and then we'll go from there.
Let's see. I think we've answered the only questions that we've had so far. So
okay.
If anybody has any questions about iApps, about how that works with Exchange or Lync,
okay.
We would love to answer them.
Let's give them a little time, and maybe Helen can show the opening dialogues for the Lync iApp while we're waiting. Okay.
Yeah, you bet.
Yeah, so what people are seeing is pretty pixelated, by the way. Yeah, it looks like that. Well, it's just... Yeah, so I don't know whether we can make that
here, let's
shrink it down by like a third.
But it's the whole thing.
If you zoom in on the browser.
Can we make
Oh, it
that
will?
smaller?
Okay. Hey, Helen, I want you to use that 100% and zoom in to like 150 and see what that does. There we go. Does that help?
I don't know.
I don't think... Well, it's a little.
Yeah, that helped a little bit.
Okay, so...
There you go.
Can we make this part smaller?
Not so much that
There
part,
you go.
but
This one?
actually, no, we can't touch that.
That's all right. What we'll do is we'll focus the viewers in on one specific part of the screen at a time, and they'll know the context from using Big IP.
Yeah, that is a little better.
There you go.
Oh, cool. All right. So let's show you all.
There you go. So now you're going to pick Lync, right?
Yep.
Probably scroll up a little bit so people can see the drop down.
Oh, I plan on it.
There you go.
There we
up,
are.
Up.
So one of the questions was if they say much better, so yay.
Woohoo!
So one of the questions is can they create an iApp and post it? And yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Please
Yeah.
do.
Yeah, it's a great way to share with other people what you've got going on and kind of build on those from a community perspective too. So DevCentral does allow you to do that. So that's something that we definitely want people to be able to do. Oh, that's a lot better.
Woohoo!
I can kind of read the words. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Thank you.
All right, sure. So again, we've got lots of fun questions here.
So it looks like you've got analytics, which is that piece that I mentioned earlier about capturing statistics around how the big IP is performing and resources being used for an app instance, in this case Lync, yes or no. And then after that, it looks like you've got, what is that up there, Helen?
Lync server front end virtual server questions.
So these are the Lync front end servers, and then we've got Lync directors.
See, look at all these fun things you can answer.
We have specific settings for specific Lync server roles, and as you go through the list, you can see the consolidated edges.
I'm sorry, should
That's
I
right.
be doing that?
Go ahead and click no there.
Yes. Okay.
Just scroll down and we'll look at the categories of questions. So by server role, you can see all of the primary types of Lync servers, and if you click yes to any of those, we expand so that you can configure the services that you like per server role. And again, this is completely flexible to support your use of the Lync topology builder, which is the tool that's used for deploying Lync, shipped by Microsoft. If any of you have deployed Lync or worked with a team that's deployed Lync, they've used this topology builder, and that's where you actually specify which Lync services will be deployed on which Lync server roles. And so now on the network side, you can come in and configure your big IP using that same frame of reference.
So we have two questions.
Okay.
One being, Rodrigo says we have the big IP 10.2.1. If we want to upgrade to version 11, we have to reconfigure to use iApps, or can we import the full configuration?
Well, it depends. If you want to look at your application instance, then you would reconfigure using your iApp. If you wanted to just port your configuration over and not worry about the iApp piece, then you could do that too. So it depends on what you want to do.
Okay, and so we have a couple more questions. Do you want to answer those now, or?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Why not?
So, hold on. So Chris says we're actually testing some deployments, and my question is regarding security. How does F5 layout relate to CAS array being in the DMZ zone versus trusted zone?
Well, ideally, and this is just again from working in support and working with the products now, as far as from a Microsoft biz dev perspective, it's best if your local traffic manager is one hop away from your CAS array. It just cuts down on latency, and by this time your users should be already authenticated and allowed as trusted members of the domain or on your network or whatever. So
the big IP sits in front of the CAS servers, but still on the local network.
Yeah.
And your authentication is done in the perimeter.
Ideally.
So out toward the edge. And so if you're going to authenticate users with something like APM, that APM device or that edge gateway device would be in the perimeter handling that off. If it's another type of proxy authentication, then that's happening first and being passed to the LTM.
Okay.
But the LTM is typically on the internal side, but in front of the CAS servers. If your CAS servers are actually in a DMZ, that's something that's actually still actively debated by Microsoft experts, and people go both ways. The point is that for us, the point is not where your CAS server lives, but that the LTM with respect to the CAS is in front.
Okay.
Right? And so if you have deeper questions about DMZ and how do you define that DMZ, and do you have 2 firewalls or do you have 3, that kind of thing, feel free to get a hold of your local F5 customer team, and we'll get the right engineers local to you embedded in that particular environment, and we'll show you the best way to set that up.
Okay, and somebody's saying putting the CAS server in the DMZ is not supported.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
that would just be
We still run across customers who do it, but you're right. It usually strikes a fierce debate.
So there's 2 more questions.
Yeah.
One's saying, I see there's availability for APM configuration in the iApp. was that a template for 10 something, or is that 11?
That is one of the, this is James. So the question is, you saw APM in the iApp, which is great. You know, kudos to you for noticing that.
Yes.
One of the big benefits of an iApp is that you can cross big IP product modules within one iApp. In the past, you would have had to go to the LTM to configure the load balancing and SSL offload, and then go to the APM with a different policy and a different template separately. And now they're together.
Awesome.
Good catch.
Yeah, especially with the visibility problems. So Todd has a question too. He says, our Lync clients on the internet endlessly reconnect to the Lync Edge server when passing through the big IP v11. Any ideas why the client can't maintain a connection?
Yeah.
I would say that there's probably an issue with persistence. Maybe, and this is something I saw in support, like if your time, so if the local time on your big IP is different by maybe 10, 15, 20 minutes off of your content servers, and this isn't just for Lync, this is for anything that you want to persist on, that'll time out your persistence records. And I'm a big fan of starting with the simple stuff first because, again, I'm lazy. So I would check the time and make sure that those are in sync, or put everybody on a network time server of some sort. And if there's still an issue, then definitely call support, because that sounds to me like there's a persistence problem there. Like the records are timing out, or they're just not starting out, or something funny like that.
Okay. And Rodrigo has another question. Is there a trial version appliance in order to practice and test with iApps?
Yep.
Yes, there is.
There definitely is, right? So the trick with iApps is that it runs on version 11. And our VMware and Zen products, which have production versions of our virtual appliance, are shipped on v11 today. It's the Hyper-V based virtual appliance that's not shipping on version 11 today. So VMware is your first big stop for that one, as far as versions of hypervisor to choose to get a virtual edition of one of our products running version 11.
Okay. And I think that was our last question. So hopefully that answered the questions that everybody had. And certainly there is a lot of expertise on the Microsoft group too. So if people have questions, they can go out there and post them, and we can get back to them. And hopefully the video replay of this will help them as well. So any last parting words, guys?
Yeah, James, I always have something to say.
I know. I always want to give you an opportunity there.
Jazz hands.
Thank you, everybody. Keep your feedback coming. And one of the questions that we're dealing with right now is whether to take our next online community meeting and focus on some questions we've received around one-arm configurations versus routed configurations with Big IP, Lync external edge services, and whether or not you're using a firewall or the Big IP to do NAT, and how that impacts internet users with Lync, versus actually going in and doing some deep dive on the SharePoint iApp. And should we spend some time showing you all how the SharePoint iApp is looking today? So if you could do some posts in the community, chat back to April right now, let us know whether you'd prefer that more one-armed versus routed config and Lync and edge services discussion, or whether you'd rather like to see an iApp for SharePoint next time. Thank you.
And just go ahead and put your answer in the chat client, and if you see this online, just go ahead and put your answer into the forum on the Microsoft group. So we will chat with you there, and hopefully we'll see you again soon for another event. And this was helpful.
We're already getting
we are exactly. We're getting both votes. So maybe we'll figure out which one comes first.
We'll thumb wrestle for it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. All right. Well, let me see. Make sure that we don't have any last questions. Yeah, I think we're good. Woohoo. Okay. So thanks everybody. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you.